Good. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome to everybody. I hope you all enjoy the nice summer weather. I think the climate situation is also something we'll touch briefly in our presentation. But anyway, welcome to our webinar to present and discuss the link between affordability of repair and maintenance and safety and sustainability of road mobility, as it will be demonstrated by the Ricardo report, which we will present to you in just a few minutes. My name is Michael Petersen. I am Managing Director at Helle Goodman Solutions AS, a small Danish company, however, belonging to a larger corporation. And since yesterday, Denmark is holding the rotating presidency of the Council of the European Union. This is a moment of pride for us Danes to see our little but ancient country preside to the destiny of our entire union. We'll get to this later, and not just out of the viewpoint of ADPA. Indeed, I am here today in my capacity as president of ADPA, the Automotive Data Publishers Association. I'll give you a short introduction to our members, because we might be rather unknown to some, or at least to some, of the policymakers. Our members are global pioneers and leaders in providing the necessary data and information needed for repairing an increasingly complex fleet of vehicles on the European roads. Our members provide aggregated, harmonized, easy-to-use technical information for the repair and maintenance of over 280 million vehicles from more than, say, 50 different vehicle manufacturers present on the European roads. The number of vehicle manufacturers are for sure, as we speak, increasing rapidly, with many new VMs from the Far East entering the European market. We, the members of ADPA, provide wiring diagrams, service schedules, step-by-step repair instructions, spare part information, and much more. And by doing so, we ensure the roadworthiness, safety, and environmental performance over the lifetime of many types of vehicles in a reliable, timely, and affordable way. Our wider sector, the complete automotive aftermarket, brings together 4 million workers in around 500,000 companies, many of them SMEs, across the European Union. We, in the aftermarket, repair and maintain cars over their lifetime, ensuring that everyone, individuals, companies, public authorities, can accomplish its daily business in optimal conditions, in particular in terms of safety and sustainability. As the car park is aging and will continue to age, considering the economic situation and the high prices of new vehicles, our role becomes every day more important. Without us, road mobility would rapidly stall, people and goods wouldn't go very far. But this crucial responsibility that we take upon us gets increasingly impaired by some powerful market players. Through technological means, commercial practices, they hinder us from proposing ever more affordable and ever more competitive and ever more innovative services and solutions to our customers, in particular the repairers. It damages the competitiveness of our business, but also the freedom of choice and the purchasing power of consumers, the car owners. This in turn has a negative impact on the safety and on the sustainability of road mobility. Fortunately, we believe that the European Union's institutions are well aware of it. And we also believe that this is the right time to finally move forward and tackle these issues through tailor-made regulatory measures. In times of budgetary tensions, unlike others, we are not begging for subsidies and fiscal rebates. We would, of course, welcome them, but we prefer to see competition and competitiveness to improve through regulatory measures which not only won't cost anything to taxpayers, but will save money to consumers and businesses. We are working with all European Union institutions, the European Commission, the European Parliament, of course, but also national governments, and now the Danish presidency of the Council of the European Union. The ongoing revision of the type approval regulation, hopefully the improvement and prolongation of the motor vehicle block exemption regulation, a legislation on access to in-vehicle technical data and functions, a revision of the end-of-life vehicle framework, AI legislation, and so much more are on the table. And we, as a sector, but also I believe the consumers, are expecting rapid progress. Now, Ed Eaton, consultant at Ricardo, will give a detailed presentation on the findings of a study we in ADPA commissioned, and which highlights the importance of affordable repair and maintenance for safety and sustainability, and the causal link between affordability and roadworthiness. We will then afterwards welcome Diogo Pinto, Acting Director of the consumers organization FIA Region 1, and Elizabeth Marker, counsel at law firm Osborne Clarke. They will discuss with me and our General Director, Pierre Thibaudat, how European legislations could transform challenges into opportunities for the automotive aftermarket, for consumers, and for society at large. Unfortunately, we got information that the Danish permanent representation couldn't participate in our debate. However, considering it is now day 2 of 6 very busy months for the representation, we fully understand. Let me already here stress something. It is rare enough that consumers and businesses are so well aligned. It means something. I hope that you find these exchanges insightful and that you will have many questions and ideas to share with us afterwards in the Q&A session. But now to the more concrete stuff. Ed, now I will hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. And good afternoon, everyone. Nice to have you here. I'm just going to share some slides, and hopefully everyone can hear me and see them. And yeah, I can see some nods from people, so good to see that. But yes, my name is Ed Eiton. I'm a senior consultant within Ricardo. And today, as Michael kindly introduced, I will be touching on the study that we delivered to ADPA, focusing on the benefits of affordable vehicle repair and maintenance. So what I'm going to do is briefly introduce you to the report, and then highlight some key findings on benefits on safety on one hand and benefits for sustainability on the other. Now, a little bit about Ricardo for those that may not be familiar. It's a global consultancy focusing on environmental engineering topics. On the environmental side, there's a wide range of issues spanning energy, infrastructure, air, water, many more. And in engineering, we primarily focus on automotive and on performance powertrains. But we focus on helping people solve problems in these spaces. And within that context, I'm in our sustainable transport team, which does a lot on European policy and particularly on the automotive sector. So we've supported on the development of the CS22 standards on life cycle analysis of vehicles. And of particular relevance to this topic, we've also supported the Commission in amendments to the roadworthiness package of proposals. So that's a little bit about what today's presentation is going to be on. As I mentioned, I just wanted to briefly run you through what the study was about. So this was concluded in February 2025 this year. While I'm talking in the background, feel free to use the QR code there to get a link to the report. If you want to download it in full and just skim it in the background, you're very welcome. But in summary, what this report aimed to do was firstly outline the policy and market context for vehicle repair and maintenance. So this touched on topics like type approval, so the standards that vehicles need to meet when they first enter the European market, periodical technical inspection, which of course is the standards for vehicles continue throughout their lifetime, and also on important aspects in on the supply side, so for vehicle repairers and people performing maintenance, for the competition within that automotive aftermarket, and in particular the relevance of the motor vehicle block exemption regulation. So after outlining this context, we then go into the benefits of repair and maintenance on safety and sustainability, and these are the highlights I will just show you briefly now. And it concluded with some affordability trends in repair and maintenance and some policy recommendations off of the back of this. These trends and recommendations are going to be the focus of the panel discussion at the end of this, so they will be contained within there, but welcome you to look at the report for the full findings there. So this was the context of the report, and I should stress, by the way, that these impacts were primarily focused on the passenger car segment, but are of relevance for other segments as well. And firstly, on the topic of safety, the key message here is that findings from literature review showed that it can prevent accidents related to technical defects. So for a bit of context, there are still many road accidents in the EU. There are around 900,000 crashes per year according to 2023 data, and this is fairly similar to how the situation was 10 years ago, with some slight variation in transport demand due to COVID. And really here, the message from literature is that one of the key causes of road accidents is technical defects. So sadly, the review did not reveal any European-wide study focusing on the causes of accidents, but a case study in Germany shows that around about 14% of accidents are caused at least partly by technical defects. And so repair and maintenance has a role to play here in reducing these accidents related to technical defects. The other section of the pies are of course, other contributors to road accidents, including user behavior and road infrastructure. But particularly on the user behavior side, these are difficult societal kind of behavioral trends, which are difficult to change overnight. So in that context, fixing defects can be seen as the low-hanging fruit. This is something that can be fixed in a relatively short time scale on an individual vehicle basis. And so it's incredibly important to consider these in contributing short term to the European Union's goals of mission zero deaths on roads. Now, it's worth noting that this evidence for Germany, it's for one country, and Germany has a relatively young vehicle fleet, so the fraction could be higher in other parts of the EU. And the literature review did show a big range in the prevalence of defects causing road accidents. So it could range anywhere between 3 and 19% in developed economies, but it could even be as high as 27% in some developing nations, including Thailand. And the developing nations aspect could be to do with the increased prevalence of importation of secondhand vehicles and those vehicles being older, for instance. So with this context in mind, and the importance stressed on repair and maintenance preventing technical defects and related accidents, I wanted to briefly stress the mechanism here by which repair and maintenance actually prevents these defects. So how is repair and maintenance triggered is a question you might ask. And in European Union, it's less common that repair and maintenance is just proactively engaged by European consumers. Most often this is triggered by periodical technical inspection, or PTI. This is kind of required by law in these inspections every 1 to 3 years, depending on the European member state and the age of the vehicle. and a large range of safety and environmental checks is performed as part of these PTIs. And these checks aim to identify mechanical wear and tear, and increasingly now software malfunctions due to the increasing complexity of vehicles on the roads. But still, common causes of PTI failure include lights, brakes, tires, and steering components. And importantly, these defect rates become more common as vehicles get older. And so what this graphical demonstration aims to show is that roadworthiness of vehicles generally declines with age. And the role of PTI, shown by the kind of vertical gray lines, is in restoring roadworthiness to the standards specified by PTI. And so really what the additional benefits of voluntary repair and maintenance could be is in fixing defects that occur between PTI inspections. And this is particularly prevalent as vehicles get older, as roadworthiness tends to decline faster as vehicles are older. So this is just a graphical representation to show where repair and maintenance can really help beyond that which is required by legislation. Now, the findings from the study are that we took the evidence from literature and we wanted to see, based on the prevalent defect rates in Germany and extending this to Europe, how many accidents could be prevented by repair and maintenance. And the key message here, so starting from the left-hand side, is that so without repair and maintenance, obviously, there is likely that there will be preventable accidents occurring on European roads, and this can have consequences on deaths, injuries, and economic losses. With the minimum repair and maintenance required by PTI, the estimated reduction in annual accidents across Europe is up to 18,000 accidents, which is a significant number. And the additional voluntary repair and maintenance, so recommended to prevent further defect-related accidents, can be a further 8% reduction in annual accidents. And so just using the evidence from literature, this shows that there is a strong case for making sure that maintenance and repair is affordable and making sure that it occurs regularly to ensure that these outcomes are prevented. So that was the findings from the report on the safety side. And now turning to the sustainability benefits, there are two main angles through which repair and maintenance aims to reduce emissions from vehicles. And the first is on the greenhouse gas emissions from vehicles, considering the entire life cycle of the vehicle. So the review of evidence shows that the optimal lifespan of an ICV, which is a combustion engine vehicle, could be 20 to 30 years, considering a wide range of environmental impacts. And what's clear is that most vehicles in Europe are not reaching this threshold of the optimal lifespan. And so by running it longer, you could reach this optimal window and thereby reduce the per year environmental impacts of vehicles on the road. What we've done here as part of the analysis is use results from Ricardo's life cycle emissions inventory of vehicles and applied this to see what happens if you run a petrol or diesel engine for 1 year longer. And so what tends to happen here is that the use phase emissions, which are shown in the light blue and the dark blue in the graph, would extend a little bit, shown by the dotted line, by around 1 to 2 tons of CO2e per year, and that's CO2 equivalent in terms of greenhouse gases. By contrast, if you were to replace that vehicle with a new vehicle, for instance, that would lead to a large increase in emissions from a life cycle perspective from the production of the new vehicle. So the inventory shows that if for an ICV, it could be around 9 tons of CO2e, and for a BEV, it could be around 9 to 12 tons of CO2e. And so clearly the benefits of reducing per year environmental impacts or the small marginal addition from running it longer, considered over a fleet basis, can be lower than if you have to produce lots of new vehicles to simply replace the ones that are defective. So this is one argument to show that there are sustainability benefits from keeping vehicles on roads longer through effective repair and maintenance. The second angle, apart from greenhouse gas emissions, is on air pollutant emissions. So in particular, there's a focus at European level on nitrous oxides and particulate matter, or NOx and PM, because these have health implications for human life. And so particularly in urban settings, these emissions tend to concentrate and cause health problems for humans. And so really what's worth emphasizing here is that as vehicles have developed over time, more and more complex and beneficial technologies have been developed to limit the amount of these pollutants going into the atmosphere. Some examples are shown on the left-hand side of your screen, which are the diesel particulate filter, which reduces PM emissions by 95% if equipped compared to if it wasn't equipped, and selective catalytic reduction, or SCR, which emits 8 to 28 times less NOx if it's functional compared to, for instance, if it's dysfunctional, or far greater benefits if there was no SCR involved in the vehicle at all. Now, as you mentioned earlier with the role of PTI, there's evidence that wear and tear reduces the effectiveness of these technologies over time, and these are known as quote unquote deterioration effects. Now, we reviewed the literature to understand what these deterioration effects might be, and based on some comprehensive analysis of roadside inspections of air pollutants on UK roads for a large number of vehicles, we see that, yes, over the lifetime of a vehicle, or 160,000 kilometers, as they showed, both PM and NOx increases significantly over the lifetime of the vehicle. And it does so more for older vehicles, which is shown in the table in the middle. A Euro 4 vehicle, the emissions increase a lot more over that lifespan than for a Euro 5 vehicle, which is newer. And so the key implication here is that repair and maintenance can actually prevent these deterioration effects from occurring, or rather, regenerate the technologies which are reducing these emissions, and thereby produce benefits in terms of pollutant emissions. And if we produce some estimates based on the prevalence of PTI defections from an emissions perspective, and also these deterioration effects that occurred over the lifespan of the vehicle. And we estimate that over the next 6 years, this could reduce around 1,500 tons of particulate matter and 22,000 tons of NOx if proper maintenance is occurring, as opposed to if we rely solely on PTI. And so, combining the safety elements with the sustainability elements, in summary, we just wanted to highlight that this report finds that vehicle repair and maintenance has various benefits, including fewer road accidents, improved air quality for citizens, and reduced greenhouse gases. And this doesn't even consider that there are many more benefits associated for consumers with convenience and other things to do with it, to have a well-maintained vehicle, and the costs associated with that repair. So that was everything we wanted to present from the study. And now I'd like to open the floor for any questions, if anyone had either clarifying questions on what was presented here, or other questions on the relevance of repair and maintenance for safety and sustainability.
Thanks a lot, Ed, for the presentation. One thing that just come to my mind, first of all, do we have any evidence or any indication of what is holding the car owners back from maintenance, or more periodic maintenance? Is it purely cost, or?
So the study focused primarily on cost-related evidence. So within the study, we looked at how there's a few different angles of how costs are increasing for repair and maintenance. There's not only the parts associated with what's being used by the repair shops, but also the labor associated with the repair and maintenance, and also crucially in the data being acquired by repair and maintenance workshop to do that. So there's various components which are all increasing. Even European-wide estimates on and inflation for the particular sectors to do with repair and maintenance are increasing higher than a standard, or rather a basket of inflation goods across the economy. But wider than that, the study did not focus on the causes of why repair and maintenance isn't happening as regularly as it should. So I wouldn't want to comment on that
No,
beyond the
that's
study
okay.
context.
We can only assume that it has an impact. Absolutely
Yes.
fine. And another question while I'm speaking, do we have any idea, but that's maybe not so much a question to you, Ed, I don't know, but I can try. But do we have any idea if our European lawmakers are aware of these findings that you have gathered actually? Or
It's a
for
big
sure, we will make them aware of it, don't worry. But at this stage,
It's a very good question. We haven't discussed it with policymakers particularly. So beyond the publication on your website, I don't know who's been able to view this. But many of the same conversations were happening in the context of the roadworthiness revision or potential revision, because the regularity of PTI can also almost be seen as a substitute for the regularity of voluntary repair and maintenance. If PTI were to happen every 6 months, then the need for regular repair and maintenance beyond that reduces, and so on. So they're clearly aware of that, of the need for regular maintenance. I'm just not sure whether the results of the study are particularly aware to them.
good. Thank you, Ed.
Thank you. Great questions.
I got also 2 questions by email, actually from some participants. The first one is, beyond the affordability of repair and maintenance, what is the importance of the local factor for such operations for safety and sustainability? So that would be the first one. And the second one is there a risk that technical defects are underestimated in the causation of accidents, since accidents often happen as a conjunction of multiple factors, human factors, environmental factors, and technical factors?
Great questions, and thank you to whoever submitted those. So the first question on the importance of locality, this is really crucial. So if a defect is spotted in between PTI inspections, then the risk of an accident will increase the further you have to drive to get to a workshop, right? So if you have a faulty tire or faulty steering, if you have to drive 3 hours to get to a workshop, then the likelihood increases of an accident happening on that route. So one could argue that the importance of local workshops is high in ensuring that the distance traveled is lower in that regard. There's also a small argument for sustainability in that case, but that would be marginal, because in the case of driving an extra couple of hours, the extra emissions are small compared to driving to a local workshop. But for safety, it's important. But we didn't see anything in the literature review of evidence linking extended driving time to a workshop to defect related accidents. So that's not something that we can quantify with evidence, but I think it's an important point to note. On the second question, if I understood correctly, so it was, are we underestimating the role of defects in accidents based on that data? Is that the question essentially? Because in theory, as I mentioned earlier, this study focuses on passenger car. So it's clear that there will be accidents involving light commercial vehicles and heavy commercial vehicles, which are not considered within the scope of this assessment. And so therefore, the benefits for safety and sustainability could be greater than what is estimated here. But that would require consideration of, I think, many more accidents, relatively speaking, happen with passenger car than with commercial vehicle on roads. And so it would be potentially not a linear scaling. It would depend on the factors considered. But as I mentioned as well, the importance of defect-related accidents varies significantly across geographies. So the evidence showed that country by country, it varies a lot based on the vehicle age and based on I guess the driving experiences within that country, and so I suspect that. So we use evidence from Germany to assist in our estimates, but if you did the same exercise for another country, it could be greater or less. And so yes, to that extent, the defect-related accident estimates may be underestimated for other contexts. Hope that answers those questions, but if it didn't, then feel free to reach out offline, and I'd be happy to follow up, and we can discuss the evidence together. I don't see any other hands raised, and I see. Okay, yes, just a comment that it'd be useful to share the study results. So yes, we'd be happy to do that, I think, in the context of the roadworthiness package. Okay, I see 2 further hands. Diogo, did you want to come in? Question?
Yes, thank you. And just a follow-up question on the issue on the causes of accidents. What is the source to determine the cause? Are these like, I don't know, police reports made on the spot of the accident by the expertise of a policeman and policewoman that got there on the first one, or there are other sources?
So the results from Germany were published statistics from the German Motor Vehicle Inspection Agency, DEPRA. So that will likely be based on the basis of police reports. And so, yes, it would, I guess, rely on the expertise of those investigating the incidents to understand what the causes were. And it can often be very complex to understand those causes in ex post. So, yes, it's certainly, I've seen some cases in the trucking sector where drivers have been blamed as cause for certain incidents where closer inspection reveals that there's a defect where that was actually the primary cause afterwards. So yes, all of these can be called into question, further contributing to the question online that perhaps we're underestimating the full impact here. Carlos.
Yes, hi, good afternoon. First of all, thank you, the ADPA, for organizing this conference. And thank you, Ed, for the nice presentation you shared with us here. I just have, it's a complementary comment on what you presented. I think it would be great as well to get a split by age of the vehicles involved in the accidents, because most of the new vehicles are included in warranty programs from the OEMs, but obviously, certainly that the majority of accidents and with the highest gravity or severity of damages are linked to older vehicle, and this is where maintenance is still more important than ever. So my question is, do you have some stats about anciency of the vehicles involved in the accidents?
I can point you to a study which I think was performed it was one of Slovenia or Slovakia. I apologize for not knowing which one. But yes, it studied the relationship between vehicle age and PTI failure, at least, which could be a proxy for when vehicle defects are occurring and where accidents are occurring. But we didn't come across any evidence directly linking vehicle age to accident causality. And in general, it's a thin point in the literature, creating that direct causal chain. And so, yes, we would definitely advocate for more research to be done in this area to contribute to this important policy issue. But I'll perhaps share with you offline the link to the study in Slovenia in case you were interested to find out more.
With pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
I would like quickly to follow up on Diogo's comment about the accidents and who's estimating what is the impacting factor. Do we have an idea about how many smaller accidents are not reported? I mean, here those who for sure will affect, in many cases, insurers, but where there's no police involved and there's no, say, personal damage, but only damage to the vehicle taken care of by insurance companies, where it could also be interesting to look into. But so that's not really considered at all, right? In your report?
It's a good question. So since it studies crashes, I don't know what threshold they've considered to be a crash in that instance. It may just be any reported instance, in which case the smaller insurance-related claims may be included, but I need to check up on that.
Okay, thanks. Good. So maybe if there is no further question to it, and we are not done yet, so if you something come to your mind, you should just shout out to Ed, and absolutely also afterwards, you're always free to direct question to the report, either directly to you, Ed, or via ADPA, via Pierre, to Ed. We will definitely love to get more questions. So now, maybe spending the last, 20 minutes, Pierre, you need to be timekeeper for us. Since we have a great panel of experienced people in the business, it would be interesting to continue the talk. And I would maybe like to ask a very open question, first of all, to you, Elizabeth, who come from or have tons of insights in the legislative world. Is this study, is the result surprising to you, or what's your general take on the result of this study?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Ed, for this really interesting presentation. I can relate personally to some extent because I live in Germany, so I'm very interested in hearing how accidents can be prevented over here. But certainly this applies anywhere. It is not surprising to me that accidents can be prevented through regular repair and maintenance. It is also not surprising, I guess, that whether people actually do that and how often they go to the workshop and do that, which is not strictly necessary, but is perhaps prudent, depends to a very large degree on its affordability, which again shows how important a functioning independent aftermarket is. And I fully agree with the audience here that it is of vital importance to bring this to the attention of the lawmakers if they are not already aware of it.
Thanks. Thanks for that comment. Also, me personally, I was looking a little bit into the priorities of the Danish presidency, and there I found something that I would like to follow up on. I think actually you raised a question, Pierre, through one among the audience with regards to free movement. It's a part of the priorities of the presidency to work on free and fair movement of workers, which is a cornerstone of the EU cooperation, and plus a lot of more in that context. Is that something you, Diogo, knows? Pierre raised it a little bit about the locality of repairers. Is that something that you, among your members or sub-members, I mean, hereby the vehicle owners, is that something they're challenged by? I'm having in mind here that this consolidation of the big OEMs in the bigger cities, does that have impact on the more remote areas, the repairability or the capability of getting their cars repaired when they are living a little bit remote?
Yes, definitely. So first of all, good afternoon, everyone. And maybe I should start by thanking ADPA and you, Michael and Pierre, for the kind invitation for me to be here, and also to congratulate Ed on the excellent presentation of Ricardo's study. I mean, as you mentioned, we do represent motorists and mobility clubs across Europe, also Middle East and Africa, but let's focus on Europe now. And one of our core missions is to defend their right to affordable, safe, and sustainable mobility. And in that sense, I mean, the study totally confirms what we have been advocating for a long time already, that regular repair and maintenance should not be a luxury. It is a vital pillar of road safety and sustainability. And the data that Ed presented is clear and speaks for itself. Now, as you mentioned, there are, and the study also, I mean, I read the report, so maybe I can say also more about that Ed didn't mention here today, but the study also highlights the trends and the rising costs of technical information, tools, spare parts, the fact that very often they are held under monopoly conditions by vehicle manufacturers. This is a growing obstacle for independent operators, and that by extension, it is a growing obstacle for motorists because we deserve competitive and accessible services. And this is where this links to your question, Michael. It's not only about affordability, it's also about accessibility, of course. Very often they go hand in hand, let's be clear. But even when they are not, I mean, they are both sides of the same coin, that consumers of the fact that consumers suffer from these trends, the affordability, so the raising costs, but also the accessibility. And of course, it is unfortunately more damaging for the people living in least populated areas, namely rural areas. But I think that the trend is even in the urban areas to have this concentration, and therefore less localization even in the cities, and therefore again affecting the accessibility of repair and maintenance for consumers.
Thanks a lot, Diogo. I am trying really boldly here to establish a link between the priorities when it comes to free movement of workers into that specific topic. It might be a little weak, the link I'm trying to make, but nevertheless, I believe it's there.
But Michael, if you allow me, then one extra sentence on that. I mean, it's not only about workers. I mean, the freedom of movement is indeed a fundamental right in the EU for all citizens. The movement is very often, be it for work or for economic activities, but also for personal leisure. I mean, and social needs. This fundamental right is affected by the lack of proper means of transport, and very often we are talking about personal means of transport, namely the private car, and there it links completely with the need for more accessible and more affordable repair and maintenance that keep the cars safe and sustainable. And this is not only for the users of the cars, it's also for the other users of the roads, because when there are accidents, they don't only affect the people who are in the cars.
Thanks. Elizabeth, another point with regard to priorities, which sounds on the surface really great. I have to say I've heard it over a couple of decades now, but it is about deregulation, and that always sounds interesting, and we all like to remove bureaucracy. And yet again, the Danish presidency will work for that. However, is that something that we in the aftermarket should be afraid of when it comes to deregulation? I mean here, maybe the vehicle manufacturers will believe that we should remove all burdensome regulation, including all those who are protecting us operating at the aftermarket. Is that a point I have here relevant, or what do you think?
Very, very relevant indeed. As you say, it always sounds good when people say we want to remove bureaucracy, right? We have too much bureaucracy, too much red tape, too many rules. Let the market sort itself out, it will work. It can work in functioning markets where you actually have competition and consumer choice. It will not work in a market where one side of the playing field has an advantage from the very beginning, and that is the vehicle manufacturers here. They produce the cars, they have all technical information on those vehicles, and with that in the background, plus an existing customer relationship, they compete on the aftermarket. And then there are the independent players in the aftermarket who do not have that information to start with, who do not have an existing customer relationship, and who still want to compete with the vehicle manufacturers. They depend on the vehicle manufacturers to give them what they need to compete with those vehicle manufacturers. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that this will not work if there are no rules forcing the vehicle manufacturers to share that kind of information. And that is exactly what we are seeing. We do have regulation in place. We have strong regulation in place with the type approval regulation, the block exemption regulation, and so on. And still the manufacturers are trying to get around it. Without it, my prediction is the independent aftermarket would have nothing, to put it very bluntly.
Yeah, I definitely agree to that statement, Elisabeth. So in worst case, or no, let me say it in another way. At least we should keep what we have, also including a prolongation and a modernization of the block exemption regulation, that's for sure. But what is your take then on enforcement? Because you say we have regulation in place, but it's actually doesn't really work necessarily as it should.
Yes, unfortunately, enforcement is necessary. Just because we have the rules in place does not mean that everybody follows them, as we've seen. And at Osborne Clarke, we've spent, as you know very well, the best part of the last 5 years enforcing this. So going to court, taking the manufacturers to court, involving competition authorities and others. So it is necessary to enforce these rules, but to be able to do so, these rules must be in place, right? So again, I'm pleading very strongly for keeping these rules, and where possible, also extending them, or at least clarifying them, because enforcement is one thing where you have very clear rules. We've seen that with access to the OBD port for vehicles. It's just a question of yes or no. Is it unrestricted or is it not? We got very clear judgments on that, and we see movement in that area. When it comes to technical information, and you told us how important it is that publishers have access to that, the rules are less clear. They say that vehicle manufacturers must provide that information, but they don't specify how exactly, other than that it must be easily accessible. So what is easily accessible? There you have a dispute. And they must provide this information at appropriate prices, which raises the next question. So yes, enforcement of these rules is and remains very important.
Thank you. Good. Then now, while you're all sitting and sweating at your offices, I would like also to address the climate topics. I haven't counted, but I guess in the priorities it's listed at least 10 times various green transitions. So Pierre, maybe a quick question to you. How do you see this continuous focus on green transition? How is it going to impact this, or what should help this green transition in seen from ADPA viewpoint? What would we ask for, and how can we help and support the green transition?
Well, I think to support the green transition, we have first to make the policymakers aware of the critical role that the aftermarket in general in playing for the circular economy and for the sustainability, for the repairability, etc., in the field of road mobility. I think it's a role which is absolutely essential. We know it because we are part of it. But it is still widely unknown and probably widely underestimated. And that's really a pity, because everyone talks about establishing new ecosystems to tackle repair, recycling, etc. But hey, we are already here, and we have specific requirements, and those should be taken into account if we want this role to be fully functional. I think that's very, very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Pierre. Definitely interesting. Very important, also related to the report that Ed just gave us a condensed view on. I noticed that a revision of the vehicle inspection rules is also on the radar. Now, asking to the complete audience, because I'm not myself really familiar with what that revision could be. Is anybody aware of upcoming revision and what the consequences could be? Maybe you again, Pierre, you're nodding.
Yes, I think indeed the future PTI legislation is a bit bridging with what Ed was saying earlier. And that's also, it will also be one of the big topic of the Danish presidency over the next months, maybe to already define a general position among the member states about the future roadworthiness package and technical inspection legislation. To summarize, sorry, I will deactivate the microphone, sorry. This legislation, to make it clear, aims at taking into consideration the uptake of new technologies, in particular the deployment of ADAS systems, of electromobility, etc., to make sure that the safety and the environmental issues which are linked to those specific technologies are also taken into consideration when doing the inspection, especially keeping in mind, and that was mentioned several times, that most projections agree that the car park will continue to age over the next years. So with this proposal, the European Commission intends, for example, to introduce a periodic technical inspection for electric vehicles and for ADAS system, to introduce annual inspection for vehicles which are older than 10 years, to include new emission testing methods for the detection of the highest emitting vehicles, which are not complying any longer with the type approval, to protect, and I think it's also important, of course, in particular for FIA, to protect the consumers against the fraudulent activities on odometer tampering, for example, and also to make technical inspection easier and that's also echoing something which was mentioned earlier, easier for cross-border movement, actually, so that in case you move to another country, you can still get your vehicle being tested and inspected in a coherent manner. Also, and that's something that would deserve a mini debate on its own, and I'm sure that here Diogo, for example, could elaborate on this later. It's also containing some initial provisions on how technical inspection centers could access in-vehicle technical data. Which is also an important debate and an important topic for the future of the competitiveness of our sector and of competition for the provision of digital services. So all those topics which are subsumed under the PTI, under the roadworthiness package, are indeed extremely important. And we hope that the Danish presidency will be ambitious and will not indeed fall into the trap of deregulation in the sense of having less legislation, but maybe will also take the other side of the medal, which is better regulation. Also echoing a bit what Elizabeth was saying earlier, that sometimes you don't need to deregulate, or maybe you don't even need a new legislation on some issues. Maybe sometimes some clarifications, some additional details can already perform a good job, can optimize understanding among competitors, and can fluidify everything for everyone.
Thank you, Pierre. I see a hand raised by somebody I know, and I know who's a PTI expert. So, Mr. Bradley, speak up.
Thanks, Michael. Very good discussion so far. We did a panel discussion at the Automotive, which Pierre has just quoted probably 50% of it. What I'd like to add to that is, as we're talking about affordability, the future PTIs will probably cost more money, and it will not be dependent on, it will be dependent on the complexity of your vehicle. So if you've got a small vehicle with very little complexity, then it's going to be around about the same price, I suppose. But if you've got something that's with all the ADAS systems and autonomous driving, then it's going to be more expensive. This will also increase the costs, as Pierre said, the BEV tests, which are quite in-depth, going into isolation testing and inductance testing. So that the cost of that equipment would have to be borne by the PTI center, and also equipment for doing ADAS testing, of which CETA is doing studies on how to do that. One suggestion there for anybody who's technical is that we have emission monitors in our vehicles today, monitoring the emissions. These are going to be increased and also submitted over the air, called OBM. The same idea could be applied to ADAS, that there are ADAS monitors that actually monitor whether the sensors are functioning correctly, whether the function itself is operating and doing what it's supposed to do, and warn the driver. The big difference here is, of course, that emissions will cause health issues, maybe within 5, 10, 15, 20 years, depends on how much of that bad air you breathe in. However, ADAS can cause it in a second. So it's really important that we start doing tests on these ADAS systems, that they are safe on the road. Thank you.
Thanks for elaborating on that, Pete. Thanks a lot. Something a little bit not related, or at least maybe not directly related to safety and sustainability, but also on the radar of the Commission, and for sure also on the radar of the Danish presidency, is innovation, digitalization, and in that context, maybe you, Diogo, on telematics, in-vehicle data, telematics, everything in that ball game, which seems to be also on the priority list. What's maybe you from the consumer side? What is now your take on telematics?
Well, it seems an easy question. It's like almost like yes or no. No, it's quite complex, of course. Let me put it like this. From the perspective of the consumer, we have been told a growing narrative over the last few years that digitalization will bring innovation, will bring great quality of services, and will bring new solutions that will also be cheaper for the consumer. So, the consumer is all in favor of all of this. The problem is that somehow we are still to see the materialization of this promise. And of course, I mean, besides or beyond, if you want, the frustration that this can bring to the consumer, we have been trying also to understand why the promise is not being realized, and we are not achieving this beautiful, innovative and digitalized world. And indeed, it seems that one of the problems is the access to data. And when it comes to this particular sector, we're talking about the gigabytes, terabytes of data that are produced by the fact that we all use our cars. And you know, from this, we started thinking that if this data is generated because we use our cars, well, there might be something there that should have to be with the consumer when it comes to the data, and who should have access to this data, for which purposes, under which conditions. And we have been working for many years together also with other people who share this vision on trying to get some basic rules on how these could be set up in a way that is fair for the players that Elizabeth mentioned, but that ultimately is good for the consumer who generates the data that we are talking about. We have seen some progress. You know, the Data Act brings some, I mean, is a step forward in that sense. It recognizes that the consumer must be at the center of the flows of this data that they generate with their devices, the devices that they have bought. And in that sense, we were hopeful that this would be, as I said, not only a step forward, but one first step into this journey of making this possible, technically possible, and practically possible also. Unfortunately, and Elizabeth, you said that it doesn't take a genius. I mean, I'm starting to think that we might need a couple of geniuses there, because I was totally convinced that we had reached the point that this was an evidence for everyone, that, you know, the consumer consent, the consumer deciding where the data goes, then that everyone in the system should have equal access to the possibility of generate innovation and innovative services and deliver them to the consumer, and therefore that the rules will be put in motion for that. And apparently the geniuses have not been able to meet yet, and this has not happened. So I'm not sure what the Danish presidency will be able to do, but what I am sure is that we are looking forward with excitement to see what this guidance document that the Commission is producing for the explaining how the Data Act should apply in the automotive sector. We are definitely looking forward for the discussion on the extension and why not improvement of the motor vehicle block exemption regulation, and we have not yet given up on the need for sector-specific legislation on access to in-vehicle data, functions, and resources. So if the Danish presidency, it's a pity they are not there, of course, but if the Danish government, together with other member states, can put some pressure on the Commission to deliver on this, what that used to be a promise. Let's be clear on this. There has been several commitments of the Commission to make this happen. I and the 40 million members of my clubs in Europe alone would be very, very happy for this help.
Thank you. I think you, Elizabeth, should have the chance also to put your 5 cents on that.
Yes, I'd love to. I'm actually still very excited about the Data Act. It's not perfect, and we do not have the sector-specific legislation yet, I fully agree. But that this basic principle got through, that the consumer or the user of the product or service should ultimately be in control of the data. From a lawyer's perspective, that is huge. At least to me, it was huge. So the fact that the manufacturer cannot use the data without the user's consent, and that they have to provide it to third parties, even competitors, if the user says so, that to me is quite big. But again, I agree, it's not perfect. Many questions remain, which again, for lawyers is good news because it means we won't run out of work. But we'll see what happens from September onwards.
Okay, so personal opinion here. I think this thing about consent is a little bit. I think we all agree to many weird terms and conditions just to move on in our daily life. So I don't know if I would put much value to that. But okay, at least you believe that there is some positive movement. Thanks a lot, Elizabeth. Good. So any other great questions, maybe from the audience, to the panel? Otherwise, if the panelists have any interesting comments that you are waiting to share with us, then feel free to do so. Oh yes, Pete.
Yeah, timelines is always a good thing to have. I can see Pierre is smirking. How fast are you going to get in with the Danish politicians, Michael? You speak their language, so.
Yeah, that should definitely help. Thanks, Pete. That's a good question. Well, I believe we are already getting somewhere. We had last week the opportunity not directly to engage with the Danish politicians, but at least on some of the authorities close to the Danish politicians. So that's a first step into the right direction. As planned for today, we would also like to have somebody in the panel today. That was for natural reasons not possible today. We might have been a little too optimistic that just one day after getting into the presidency, they should also join our little community here. But I can definitely say that we have already established quite some good connections. Let's see what we can move along that way. I, of course, have my experience with the Danish politician, but I would maybe hand over another question in that context to Pierre. How much, Pierre, can we move? Also thinking over other presidencies, how much can we move through this presidency?
Well, I think the presidencies usually consider themselves to be more facilitators. I don't know if Diogo would agree, for example. They are here to facilitate the negotiation between the different member states. Sometimes they don't put themselves on the forefront of the different files precisely to be able to negotiate in the background, to moderate, to mediate between the different stakeholders. We have the chance, indeed, that in the case of the Danish presidency, there is historically a fair balance between competitiveness on one side and competition on consumers on the other side, which is one of those historical traits of Danish politics. And which will help, and I mentioned earlier, that hopefully we will not have just raw deregulation, but we will have better regulation in the sense that we will get clarification on what needs to be clarified, etc.
Thank you, Pierre. would another question in that context, just completely top of my head, is it of any help that the Danish presidency is of a country which are not producing any vehicles? To you, Pierre.
To me or to Diogo, I think, of course, it helps because indeed the vehicle manufacturers have this tendency to inflate the figures, to inflate the weight. They always claim to represent, 13 million jobs in the EU. And then when we look at the details, we realize that out of the 13 million jobs, well, I think it's 6.9, which are actually people building roads and bridges and driving taxis and lorries and ambulances. So those are not really jobs done thanks to the vehicle manufacturers. And then if you look at the rest of the figure and you deconstruct it, you see that the vehicle manufacturers have how many employees by now? I think it's 1.3 million in the EU, Diogo. And the rest is actually with the spare parts, with the replacement spare parts manufacturing, with the leasing companies, with the aftermarket, etc. Which also means that the people in the aftermarket represent what? 3 jobs out of 1 for the vehicle manufacturers, more or less. And that's also, I think, an important message that we have to convey, that the vehicle manufacturers are representing less and less jobs in the EU due to the technical and commercial decisions in the past. And that's so fine. But the real champion maybe of the European automotive sector is not any longer the vehicle manufacturers, it is the aftermarket, which until recently was able to innovate, to propose new products, new solutions to the customers or to the end consumers, precisely because up until now, we had a regulatory framework with a block exemption or the type approval regulation, which enabled us to do so. Now, the real challenge is probably to actually upgrade this framework in the light of electromobility, of ADAS, whatever, to make sure that actually we can still compete and that the European aftermarket companies, which for the moment are still worldwide leaders, I think we can say it proudly, remain so. Otherwise, what we will see in a few years is that we will not only have cars from other countries outside of the EU, but we will also have aftermarket products and services, all coming from outside of the EU, with very limited added value in the EU, very limited jobs in the EU, and very limited consumer choice as well at the end of the day.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. I got a question here via another channel, very much related to PTI and to maintenance. Let me try to rephrase it a little bit. I think I will forward the question to you, Diogo. Certain EV manufacturers are not suggesting any scheduled maintenance, and those are proven to fail big time at the PTIs. Is that something you are aware of, Diogo? And that we see that some new ones are maybe trying to convince consumers that now their new EVs they don't need maintenance anymore. And then in reality, it turns out that they are actually driving around with lots of fails. Is that something you're aware of, Diogo?
Well, to be frank, I think that most of the evidence that we have so far regarding the private use of electric vehicles is still very anecdotal and not something that we could rely on in statistic terms and so on and so forth. So I definitely have heard stories that could confirm that, but I mean, those are individual experiences, and I'm not sure that they have that they are representative of the reality. Now, we do know that there is among the electric vehicles, there is a bigger penetration of new players in terms of manufacturing brands. Some of these players come from far away and have not yet or not at all their networks of workshops, be it official or authorized or contracted, whatever. So there's probably a difference there between brands. I mean, I think that the most, let's call it incumbent manufacturers, they have similar practices when they come to electric vehicles. I mean, there is also some knowledge around that seems to indicate that indeed electric vehicles, because they have much less mechanical components and mechanical details, have less maintenance needs. But I would definitely say that none of our clubs will recommend to their members not to maintain their vehicles because they are electric. So I want to be clear on that. And anecdotal or not, the evidence is that, as the study that Ed just showed to us, I mean, and I think that applies to any kind of powertrain. Well-maintained vehicles are safer, they are more sustainable, they are more performant, and they are better choices for their users and for the rest of the users of roads.
Thank you, Diogo. I think for sure a lot of it is anecdotal, but there is now it is referred to a report from ADAC where some of the first EVs entering the market without maintenance, they are now, based on facts, based on numbers, they are failing at the PTI. So let's follow that closely. Pete, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what the ADAC said, because at the moment the PTI inspectors cannot touch any of the high voltage side of the vehicle. So they're only looking at lights, brakes, tires, kick the tires, that sort of thing, suspension, the normal things that apply to any other vehicle. So singling out EVs for that, yeah, I mean, maintenance, routine maintenance on an ICE vehicle doesn't start going through to suspension and stuff like that unless it's a failure. So it's a bit of finger pointing where it's not really necessary, because in the future, when the PTIs get all this equipment to test the high voltage electrical side, then we'll probably see a lot more of the older vehicles failing. So that would be the test I would see. But as far as it's concerned these days, there's very little maintenance. Maintenance in the fact of a service is just the brake fluid every 2 years, and that's it. So, maybe an air filter and stuff like that. But then again, it's all down to the owner to have that seen to.
Yeah. Good. I would like to just also hear in some of the last minutes, Elizabeth, to maybe from a legislative viewpoint, I know that a lot of things is happening around the type approval legislation, and that goes in I believe a good direction. So maybe also from an association viewpoint, we will now maybe start focusing on the block exemption regulation. Would we still need to focus on the block exemption regulation? Should we still have focus on that, or should we be happy now with the adaptations or amendments to the type approval regulation in a broader context?
You should never be happy with the existing regulation. No, that's a very good question, actually. And to me, the clear answer is yes, please continue to focus on block exemption as well. Both are important, both the type approval regulation and the block exemption regulation. They are like the two legs you're standing on, basically. The block exemption regulation is an important addition to type approval because it's competition law. That is a very, very sharp sword. And it is something that all players in the market pay very much attention to. It is different from type approval, and type approval has its benefits over the block exemption regulation from the perspective of the independent aftermarket, but it's a very important addition to it, because it basically says, okay, dear manufacturers, if you do not do this and that, you are violating competition law, and that can draw fines by the authorities. It can draw decisions which prohibit them from doing certain things. It's a very mighty weapon in your arsenal that you should not just let go.
Good. So thanks, Elizabeth. With that in mind, what would you maybe 1, 2, 3 super important points that we from ADPA and maybe also from FIA, what should we fight for? What's missing? What should be adapted? Could you give us a good idea about that? With regard to renewal of the block exemption regulation?
Yeah, I could, but I think Pierre is much better positioned to do that, and he's already grinning. So if you don't mind, I'd hand this one over to Pierre, because he's just done a paper on that.
Thank you so much. Indeed, the block exemption is now my little pet project. I will not, I think, as Elizabeth said, indeed, the two legislation are crucial. They don't go without each other. The block exemption is really about the principles, and the type approval transforms those principles into concrete requirements to make it simple. And maybe the lawyers won't agree with this oversimplification of things, but to make it in layman terms, that's more or less how it works. So that's why it's indeed so important to keep both legislation, which can be improved in the case of the motor vehicle block exemption regulation in several ways. I believe, indeed, one of the most one of the low-hanging fruits, but I don't want to overstep on Diogo's feet here, is the issue of warranties. Warranties remain the main source of conflicts related to the block exemption regulation, the main source of complaints to national competition authorities, and that's probably because the existing provisions are still not clear enough. So maybe here something which would be good is indeed not to create something completely new, but to clarify those provisions to improve the warranty, to improve the information of consumers, and to make sure that the consumers are not falsely kept captive within the authorized networks under undue claims. Other things which could be improved under the motor vehicle block exemption regulation is the list of items of technical information which the vehicle manufacturer should make accessible under fair and reasonable conditions to the independent aftermarket. We have this very nice sentence in the motor vehicle block exemption regulation, which says basically that because of technical evolution, the notion of technical information is an evolving concept. And that's a very important sentence. However, of course, what we see is that sometimes some people don't understand what it means. And if we don't provide them with a clear list of examples, then they don't include those items of technical information into what's made available. And that's why, for example, in 2023, when the last block exemption was renewed, the Commission has introduced some items such as in-vehicle data, has introduced some items regarding the battery management systems. And here, probably what the Commission could do is go even further. And we've mentioned it around telematics. Maybe the Commission could say that access to in-vehicle functions and resources is equally important. Maybe they could provide more guidance on the safety information for the handling of batteries, which come with specific thermic or electric risks, which are not communicated so far to the independent aftermarket. So those would be very concrete example of clarifications, improving the legislation without reinventing the wheel, I believe. But for those who are interested into this specific topic, I have an extremely detailed position paper with 28 pages and a long list of amendments. So don't hesitate to send me an email on this, and we will have another 5 hours chat on one of those pages alone.
Thanks a lot, Pierre. And I think on that note, we have to look at the time, and thanks to all participants. Special thanks to the panelists. Thanks to you, Ed, for that brilliant report. Thanks for being here, everybody, and thanks for now. Pierre, any practical information before we close the meeting?
Not particular. The meeting was recorded, and we will make the recording available. So in case you arrived late, or in case you think some colleagues might be interested, please let us know. And of course, if you still have a last-minute question, now is the time. Otherwise, we all stay available by emails, quite obviously.
For sure. Good. No further questions. Then, thanks a lot, and goodbye to everybody.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
Thank you
Many
for
thanks,
having
everyone.
us.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.